In Perspective, Episode 70.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Branco. Welcome once again to In Perspective. I'm very pleased to have with us once again my friend and co-host Al Hensel. Good day, Al. How are you on this lovely day?
Good day to you too, Bob. I hope you're well, and I hope everybody else is also.
Thank you. Let me give a kudos to some folks who are supporting our program, aside from our faithful listeners, of course. We have Jacqueline Sylvia over at JS Web Solutions. Thank you, Jackie, once again for making sure that all of our In Perspective programs are successfully archived
Thank you, Jackie.
on my website, which is www.brancoevents.com/podcasts. Go there and listen to whatever episode of In Perspective you would like to listen to. Also, many thanks to Out of Sight Radio and Joy Internet Radio for continuously airing In Perspective on a weekly basis. Thank you very much. We've been talking a lot about major software companies, such as Microsoft as an example. There are others who relentlessly update us on new programming changes for our computers. So today we're going to introduce somebody who has a lot of knowledge in this field, Bill Salander, or Salander. I'm not sure how he wants me to pronounce his name, but either one, I suppose. Bill has been on our program before. He's coming back from last fall for a repeat appearance. Hi, Bill. How you doing?
Oh, well, good morning, everybody, and just hot and humid here in Florida. I think my ACs could use a break, and that probably will take place in the next couple of months.
Before we get into the dialogue, I want to take into consideration some comments that have been made in advance by some folks who may or may not call in today or may listen to In Perspective after it's been successfully archived. I am fully aware that there might be some effort made by some of these software companies to do things that are going to be valuable to the blind, to make it easier for the blind to navigate. With that said, I know that I have a lot of testimony to the contrary. Al has a little bit of testimony to the contrary. And I know several other people in the blind community, especially those with screen reading capability. Now, Al's problems have nothing to do with screen reading capability, but he had a problem the other day, which he may or may not want to address, that's up to him, regarding an update which threw off his production of podcasting, to say the least. In my case, whenever Microsoft wants to update my Skype, or whenever Mozilla wants to update my Firefox, a tech support gentleman has to come by my house and restore my settings to the previous days before the update happened, because the new stuff is not adaptable with my speech software. In fact, in the case of Firefox, it tells me right off the top when I open it up, your Firefox is not adaptable for screen readers. So this is where we have a problem. And I understand what some folks out there are thinking, like Reginald. Okay, I get what he said. We have to go with the facts here. And my facts are that whenever I am caught in an update or an upgrade, I cannot navigate or function the way I used to function. Is this fixable? Maybe. It may cost a lot of money if you are not supported by an organization who advises you to upgrade your screen reader. I also know some folks who have told me they're willing to switch over to Apple computers because there's a problem with these companies upgrading. My tech support person, who happens to be sighted and happens to work for the Share Foundation locally, an organization who manufactures computers for people with physical disabilities, told me during his last visit, and this is his opinion, not those necessarily shared by the folks on In Perspective. In his opinion, Microsoft has no regard for blind people's screen readers. It's not a priority for Microsoft. When they want to relentlessly update their programming, they just go right ahead and do it because they can and because it's profitable for them. Now, I will say this again for the 50,000th time that I've said this to other people. This is where consumer groups of the blind should continuously work with these companies to remind them that we count, that we have navigation problems, that we have adaption problems. Not all of us can afford our own screen reader upgrades. Therefore, when we are forced into upgrading, we take a step backwards. My tech support man had to disable all of my update options so that I don't get them anymore. That's how serious my problem is. I'm not saying that everybody agrees with me. They don't have to. But I think I know enough people where we can have a fair, factual discussion about this.
So before Bob, we bring Bill in because I think Bill's going to be our solutions guy. Just for a bit of background for everybody, Bill is tremendously knowledgeable working with companies to bridge the gap between, and Bill, please correct me if I'm wrong, but a big emphasis on what you do, question is to bridge the gap between issues that occur with folks using assistive technology in a corporate environment. Is that pretty accurate?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on.
We appreciate you coming on at last minute as well. Thank you.
What I'm doing right now is I'm working with the Center for the Visually Impaired here in Daytona Beach. My title right now is Assistive Technology Instructor. As such, we help those who need instruction on using their iOS devices such as iPhones, iPads, that sort of thing. Computers, we work with both JAWS and NVDA, which I will get to a little bit later, and other sorts of technology that comes down the road. So I do not claim to be a genius by any fashion. I'm not certified, other than I am finishing up my screen reader endorsement for the state. So hopefully we'll have that done in the next few weeks. I took the written exam and that was no problem. So now there's just a couple of other things and I'll have that under my belt. But all that aside, I'm not certified in Microsoft. I'm not certified to handle certain networking issues and so forth. The only thing I can do is impart my advice and opinions on what should be done, in certain situations. So that's where I kind of fit in. And I've been playing with computers since 1986 or thereabouts. So I've come up through the ranks, but again, as I say, I am no genius or certified or anything else like that. So, hopefully, people do get something out of what we're about to talk about.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Before we continue, Bob, I did want to take you up on your offer to allow me to basically give my latest update issue, and it's probably typical of many PC users using Microsoft Windows in all facets: blind, non-blind, disabled, non-disabled. My situation occurred because, in part, my fault. I use Windows 10, and I always welcome Windows 10 security updates. That's pretty much a must, given in today's environment where people are always trying to exploit and get into folks' computers and smart devices and whatnot to try to grab their identities or their cache passwords or whatever it might be. So that's constantly going on. It's a cat and mouse game, as everybody knows, between the good guys and the bad guys to try to keep the bad guys at bay, and the bad guys are trying to just get one little tiny chink in there so that they can grab their piece of the pie that's not meant for them illegally. So anyway, an update occurred unbeknownst on Wednesday. Because I'm Windows 10, I went with the defaults, which are basically Windows updates me whenever they have updates. And so that's what was going on. I've been a 10 user, leaving my updates on default now. since April of 2016. So it's been a little bit more than 2 years where I've basically had maybe a few little bumps in the road, but ones that didn't really cause me too much headache. Well, on Saturday morning, we were all set with a guest to do a podcast, an In Perspective podcast. And many of you know which one it was because Bob had gotten the promotion out and everything. We had just done a podcast 4 days prior to then on a different venue with no problems at all. So I went up, I set up everything, I launched my recorder, and we were all set to go. And I hit the record button and nothing happened. Long story short, I did a few things that wasted about 20 minutes of time, not to say wasted a whole hour plus of our guest's time. You know, our guest was on with us, et cetera, et cetera. Well, as it turned out, what happened was I did my homework after we determined that there was no way we could record the show. So I went back and I started troubleshooting, and I found out that Windows had done an update to its system, part of which was Skype. It probably did it as a package because, as most of you know, Microsoft owns Skype now. So it's integrated very thoroughly into the Windows software package by default. As I troubleshot, and I still don't know how this happened, but the updates that it made on Skype, and I'll try to put this as simply as I can, caused my recorder not to recognize Skype. Now, my recorder is just a little tiny app. It's called, fancily enough, originally enough, MP3 Skype recorder. How original. But it works, and it allows me to use some features in there that allow me to email 1 hour long files. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But the point is that I can't use just any audio recorder because I have to get it down to the point where the files are small enough for them to be emailable through the Outlook framework. And this is why, Bill, I'm glad you're here, because if there is a solution, you can probably give it to us and anybody else with the same problem. But the point is here, folks, what I had to do is I had to uninstall my latest version of Skype in order to go back to a previous version. The whole nightmare ended up taking a little bit over 3 hours. And I think the reason we're doing this show is to show that, yes, updates can be very harmful to many different programs. We need to probably come up with some protective measures because the companies involved aren't always synced out of the gate with updates. It's probably going to take another update to my MP3 Skype recorder program to fix that bug that now exists between Skype and it. And so we just need to probably show people we need to be careful. Maybe Bill can help us to make appropriate settings that don't allow us to become increasingly more insecure, for lack of a better word, as we move along and compute through this nefarious virus and maliciousness that's going on out there. But at the same time, maybe take protective measures to make sure that a lot of our programs unknowingly also don't get hurt in the process. So anyway, Bob, Bill, that's my story.
Okay, let me just add one more thing about Skype. Skype is great. We're doing it now. I do it on another venue with Al on another podcast. I do it in my everyday life a lot of times. And the more that Skype gets updated or upgraded, I hear more complaints. I know I'm using that word loosely. I know a person who's listening who does not want us to complain, and that's okay. We're not trying to complain. Okay, we're being realistic. There are many blind people out there that have told me in various discussions they loved GW Connect. It was the best thing ever regarding Skype communication. I know there are other things out there like Teen Talk and this new thing that Reg pointed out that's coming. But does it adapt to? Does it adapt to JAWS 18 or 2018 as they call it? Does it adapt to 16? Does it adapt to 15? Does it adapt in Windows 8.1? And that's another thing. I don't want to upgrade to Windows 10. I want to keep 8.1 as long as possible. My techie agrees with me. In fact, he insists that I not go to Windows 10. And he has his reasons. I don't want to go into them right now. Sometimes the philosophy of the old days really makes a lot of sense. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Amen, brother. You bet.
Okay? But these companies want to upgrade. I listen, if they want to upgrade, God bless them. If they're smart enough to come up with things that they deem more convenient for everybody, especially the sighted, then fine, go right ahead. Just consider the blind. That's all I'm asking. Bill, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, I mean, I can see a lot of your points. It's very, very inconvenient when things get updated on one side but not the other. Case in point, excuse me, we're dealing with Skype issues per se, and wasn't too long ago they went to version 8, and there was a thing that went out saying that version 7 was going to be discontinued, that it was not going to be updated anymore, it would no longer be supported. In fact, it would be rendered useless. And I believe that a few people had gotten their hands on version 8, tried it with the screen readers, found out that it did not work. So essentially, I believe what has happened so far I believe between the screen reader producers and Microsoft, they've come up with the fact that, yes, okay, it does need work. This is what we'll do. But in the meantime, we'll extend version 7 out so that at least people still have access to Skype. Now, I don't know how long that's going to last. I don't know how long, all of this is going to take place. I mean, we're coming into a new version of JAWS 2019. And from what I understand, I haven't been able to investigate it too much further, but I understand that a lot of these problems are going to be addressed and handled. So, but at some point, things change. And the reason why they change is because, and I think, Al, you briefly touched on it earlier, you have people out there who just love nothing better to do than to hack into things, to tear things apart with viruses and things of that nature. And the other side of the fence is you have the software makers, i.e. Microsoft, even Apple, trying to stay a step ahead of these people. And things have to change, and things do get changed. And I sometimes wonder if maybe there's certain things that get left behind. Now, how do we fix that? I think the thing is yes, we can, and I'm not going to use the word complain. I'm going to say suggest. We need to suggest to, say, for example, Microsoft, hey, don't forget we're out here. Can you at least stay in contact with the screen reader people, i.e. Freedom Scientific, or now known as VFO, and NVDA, and there's a couple of others out there that do have access to, say, Windows 7 up through 10. You have your screen reader users out here. Please at least consider them while you're developing and testing and everything else like that. When you go in and you start complaining and say, oh, I hate your company and you have to be careful how you word things, because if they see that, you're just looking to bash them, they're not going to pay attention to you. So, I think people just need to be careful what they say there, be careful how they couch their words. I've always heard, a little bit of honey gets a lot of flies. So, if that can be useful here. So I just think that, try to stay, up to date as much as possible, and just be just know that there are more than one screen readers. Now, we briefly touched on NVDA. NVDA is very, very useful. It is almost like using JAWS. I'm not saying it's exactly like using JAWS, but it's very, very close. As a matter of fact, when Microsoft came out with Edge, the new browser, it took a very long time for JAWS to be able to work with that. NVDA was up and running, I think, within the next update or so. They actually found a way to get into it, make it work, and it worked very, very well. And the same thing with Firefox. Firefox came out with their new, I think it was called, what is it called, Quantum. And, it was, very unuseful with JAWS. But NVDA worked very well with it. There was a few hiccups here and there, but I mean, it in most cases, it works very, very well. Now, JAWS finally has caught up, and, Edge is useful, Firefox is useful, but, we're talking the 2018 version. So if you get into a position where, and I think it's going to happen, as much as I hate to say it, but a lot of the earlier versions of JAWS will be rendered unusable because the way that Windows is coming into being, and if you don't have the wherewithal to be able to upgrade, I would strongly suggest using NVDA. As a matter of fact, where I work, a lot of our clients come in and unable to purchase JAWS. So we put them on NVDA and everything works just fine. So, anybody in that position, give NVDA a try. It's
So
free.
Bill, it is free. Okay, you just
Yes,
answered
it
my
is.
next question. So is this recognized as open source?
I believe it is. Yes.
Okay.
Because there's a consortium, if you will, down in Australia that started this. But apparently there's a lot of contributors all over the world that handle this, and they've really come up with a fine product, I think. The default synthesizer is not the greatest, but, it is usable if that's what you have. And again, too, on resources, it's very light. So, it's something to consider.
Give us, Bill. No, because that's a great idea. And for folks like Bob, who have just grown used to and very comfortable with the interface and functionality of JAWS, for instance, now the idea is that JAWS is extremely expensive. The upgrades or the updates to other things that are going on, such as Windows updates, seem to be, at least in this last scenario that you described, Bill, a little bit slower. How would you, so if you were to take a bullet comparison between JAWS and NVDA, how would you rate the good and the bad, and overall, which would you say is easier to use in terms of functionality and user interface?
That's kind of tough because it's depending on what you're doing. I would actually, and there was something else that just came up about JAWS too that I'll mention here later, but of course, there's two versions of JAWS. You have your home version, and then you have the professional. And you will see in the workplace JAWS used pretty much exclusively. Now, does that mean that NVDA can't handle that kind of a thing? Not necessarily. There are different keystrokes you may have to learn. For example, now I use Braille a lot when I'm in the office. It helps a lot with, doing word processing and that sort of thing. And I do have a Focus 80, which is a Freedom Scientific product. Now, of course, that's going to play very well with JAWS, obviously. I mean, everything's built in. If I try to put it on NVDA, it doesn't work unless I can download the drivers. Now, I've downloaded the drivers, but because I don't have access to the network or anything, I can't install them. I have to wait for somebody to come in and do that for me. So, it is usable with Braille, at least, in terms of Focus products, but maybe not quite as easy to install. There's other features like, say, if I'm using Word and I'm using NVDA, I use the spell check. It really doesn't tell you what the suggestions are. You have to kind of fiddle with it a little bit. Where with JAWS, it usually comes up pretty much automatically. So, I mean, there's different things that each one of them do that, if you can get away with using the free version, if you try it out in the workplace or you try it out at home and it does whatever you want it to do, hey, go for it. I mean, I recommend it for those who can't afford JAWS and just simply, don't want to pay into the system like that. I mean, they do ask for a little bit of a contribution if you're downloading it, and that's up to you. NVDA is quite good, and like I said, it's got a lot of the keystrokes that are similar to using JAWS. I'd say give it a try. Now, go ahead,
gentlemen.
Yes.
We have another person that would like to be part of this discussion.
Awesome.
Steve Thieberge from Attleboro is on the call. So welcome, Steve.
Hey. Well,
Hey, Steve.
I really think it really is an individual thing. I think money talks. I think NVDA is great. I have nothing against it. I have it on my computer. But I really think with the upgrades, it's not about excluding us so much. Like you said, we can suggest. I mean, we had an issue with the iOS and the Messenger wasn't working, and we were all looking forward to iOS 12. But I'm going to hold back and let the other guinea pigs do it. But it's really, to me, it's the big companies' rule. I mean, we can't escape that reality, and it's a double-edged sword. I mean, I think Windows, with all the issues, I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, well, Microsoft doesn't care, and, I get it, because I've been in that frustration loop, and I upgraded my Firefox, and it wasn't working, so I had to go back. Thank God I had the old version. So it's really, for us, it's more dramatic. I get it, because for us, for a sighted person, they can say, oh, I'll just click here, and I'll go here, and call tech support and look at the arrows and we can fix it. But for us, it's a catastrophe because it's like, I can't get online. I can't browse. So, yeah, last week the Firefox was automatically updating itself, and I had to go to the, I guess I'll plug the Carroll Center because they have a technical for all the graduates. It's like, what happened? It's like, oh, just turn off your automatic updates, go back to your old version. So, yeah, we need a network of people that have the experience, and it's not easy. But I don't want to see, I see a lot of the stuff online. It's like we're having a war with NVDA versus, it's what works for you is great. Like I said, I have NVDA. I've used it. I'm a JAWS user. I mean, that's just my experience. But I'm not going to sit here and say JAWS is the best. I do think, they should better because they get enough money for the product. So, but for me, it's more we have to upgrade. For most people, it's a pain in the headache. But for us, it can be a catastrophe because it's like we're stuck because we need a specialist to say, oh well. And for the average person, they can usually get around it, and it's like, oh, that was a headache. But
Steve, my upgrade probably happened at the same time yours, and my techie said exactly the same thing that you did. Uninstall the update options and go back to the original settings. But
the thing is, Bob, at some point, I like the days when DOS was, we didn't want to go to Windows. And you're on Windows 8.1, and I don't blame you. You don't want to change, but I don't know when it's going to happen, but at some point, like I said, I can't predict it. You're not going to be able to do that anymore. It might be 5 or 10 years down the road, probably not that long. But
I wonder if I could jump in, Steve, and thank you very much for your comments, because we're going to have probably more questions and you'll stay with us. But Bill, I just wanted to ask you to circle back to a point that you made about Microsoft trying to collaborate with smaller groups like ours and using honey as opposed to vinegar. I generally believe, although it doesn't always come out that way because I'm very brash and I'm very direct to the point about anything, and sometimes I use too much vinegar. But using the honey approach over a long period of time, Bill, would you say, in your exposure to Microsoft and their forums and whatnot, and how they interact with groups like ours, would you say they're getting better, staying the same, or getting worse at responding to our, as you call them, suggestions?
Well, everything that I've heard from, say, VFO and some of the comments that I've seen coming from the users on NVDA, it is getting a little better, if that makes any sense.
Okay, that's good. So there's progress forward. That's good.
I now, whether that's going to stay that way is another story. Again, you're dealing with a large company. So, you got people in and out of the departments, you got people in and out of the company itself, things change and, roll around like crazy. So, maybe right now it's pretty good. I mean, it could be a little better. I would like to see where Microsoft is coming up with an update and get the betas out to some of the screen reader people to beta test them and make sure that, yes, they're accessible, how accessible, and there's different criteria that have to be met. And I'm not sure that that's actually happening. I mean, it may be, but it seems to me that sometimes what happens is Microsoft, or even just any company for that matter, comes out with an update, and then the screen reader people are sometimes playing catch up. Now, sometimes it's not so bad. I mean, we can get it done real quick, but there's other times when, it takes quite a while to fix the problem. I mean, I brought up the instance of Microsoft Edge. That took a long time to fix. I have tried Microsoft Edge. I don't particularly care for it, but that's my opinion. That's, but somebody else might. So, the speed of getting things fixed, I think, needs to be brought up.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think in general, I think things are at least trying to get better. So
okay.
I hope the trend continues.
Same here. So this one is to Bill and Steve, this question. So somebody like Bob encounters a problem with a program not being able to be used by JAWS, let's say, like you brought up Firefox, Bob. What user groups, gentlemen, would you suggest that a person like Bob, who comes up with, say, a JAWS-related issue or any other issue related to just computer navigation, that interface directly with Microsoft, who could people who have issues like this go to in order to add their complaints to and get them right into the mainstream focus, of Microsoft? Who would they go to complain?
Good question.
Well, my opinion is, you can go right to JAWS and explain the situation, and more times than not, they're going to come back and say, well, it's not our problem, it's the problem of the software vendor.
Right.
Okay, so fine and dandy. So then your next step would be to contact, in this case you mentioned Firefox, which is Mozilla. And I have to say, Mozilla actually has been quite responsive when it comes to dealing with issues and screen readers. I applaud them for that. They've actually been quite good at it. However, this latest update that they did, And they did it. We also have to keep in mind security. Everything that's been going on lately is due to security reasons.
Oh yeah, I'm not denying that at all. I agree with that.
Trying to plug holes and everything else like that, and trying to come up with new schemes to try to keep things from, getting in. So, again, it's and Al alluded to it earlier about a cat and mouse game. So, we have to always keep that in mind. So, first of all, you have to decide what the problem is. Is it a JAWS issue? Is it say, for example, a Firefox issue? Or could it be a Windows issue? And you have to go through the channels. It's painstaking. It can be sometimes problematic, but if done the right way, you can usually get a result.
Right. So Bill, let me see if I can put it this way, because we've got a lot of, I'm sure, myself, by the way, included in that category, users out there who maybe don't have the time to just research all this stuff, who aren't maybe very proficient at troubleshooting. I'm pretty good at troubleshooting once I understand the issue, but I don't. There's probably a very narrow number of issues that have come across my plate. So is there literally a group, Bill, a user group, a consumer group, an advocacy, say, for the blind or for the disabled, that a person could go to and say, hey, look, I'm having a problem with X. What the heck do I do? And maybe that somebody within that group is really good at, oh, yeah, I know somebody else who had that issue. Here's the solution. Or, no, there isn't a solution at the moment, but we are on top of it, or we will get on top of it because of your complaint, and we'll get to the right people to get it corrected. Is there such a group out there that can
I can name one.
Streamline it? Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to give one a plug, and I'm going to make some assumptions here. I realize that, but there is a group in Massachusetts called Vibug. Steve, you might have heard of them.
Yeah.
VIBUG.
Yeah.
Okay, and they are a computer users group that meets a lot. In fact, they have seminars online. They meet online sometimes or in person. And I'm going to assume that many members of this group have this particular concern and or this particular knowledge on the subject. That's one.
There's a lot of groups out there.
I'm sure.
Absolutely. And, there's even, if you go through and you look for a mailing list, there are blind computer users that have mailing lists up there. And they're pretty good. I mean, sometimes you got to filter through the static from other stuff, but in most cases, you can ask a question and pretty much get an answer. It's okay. Like, is anybody else having this problem? What did you do to fix it? Or can you fix it or whatever, but again, the issue goes back to, how the, screen reader producers and the software vendors themselves are communicating with each other. So, if they have a good open line of communication, if the networking is good, with people in different departments, a lot of things can get done and a lot of issues can be avoided. But if that doesn't exist, then you're still going to have the same problem.
Yeah.
I sometimes I wonder, organizations such as, like, say, NFB and ACB and some of them, if they've let their voice be known, and I don't mean to offend anybody who's part of any of these groups, but, if they do, then, how are you communicating? We go back to the honey and vinegar part. Is there a lot of vinegar being thrown out there, or is it? Because I do find that sometimes when it comes to advocacy from some of these groups, they, it's an or else kind of a deal, and that's not the way to handle a lot of this type of issue.
Totally agree.
So
we have two sides to the Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you're going to buy a computer for $1,000, a new computer, and buy JAWS. And everyone says, oh, a new iPhone is really expensive. And I definitely agree. But you have built-in voiceover. I'm not saying that's perfect. And I'm not plugging any company, but it's interesting how Apple and even the Androids, I'm not familiar that much with Android, it's built into the, now they have issues too, but it's like the problem with Microsoft, and I'm a JAWS user. If I didn't have JAWS, I would, I'd be lost, but it's not part, I know they collaborate, but I think at least with the Apple and even the Android, it's part of the system. They may not be 100% aware of our issues, but you buy it and it's built in. If I'm spending $1,000 for a computer, it would be nice if JAWS was built in. So I think the thing with Microsoft, and like I said, I'm not promoting one over the other because I'm a JAWS user. I use Apple too. It's just that JAWS is separate from Microsoft. They might collaborate, but it's a different company. So they have to go back and forth and collaborate. And they had issues on Apple with the Messenger app, and it was like a month, and it was like, it didn't work. But they fixed it because they have a lot of vocal, and believe me, it can be as frustrating on the other side too. I'm not saying it's better, but at least the voiceover is built in. You're going to spend $1,000 on a phone. The damn thing should talk to you, and it should do my laundry too. It's like you're spending double on the Microsoft, and like I said, I don't want to promote one over the other because I use both. I think in some ways the Microsoft Office and those tools are more professionally, but someone might disagree with me, but I think it should be built. I think that should be the standard, is have it built in. Have JAWS as part of the computer.
Well, if I can put
the money.
If I can jump in here real quick. Microsoft Windows does have a screen reader as such. They call it narrator, but it is less than adequate. I'll tell you that right now. But
kudos on the magnifier too, Bill. It's there, but
right.
it's pathetic as hell. Yeah,
it's horrible.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, Steve makes a good point. The companies are building it in, like say with Apple, Android. I have experience with Android and Google TalkBack. Again, each of those systems has their good points and bad points. And I always thought that Microsoft had a terrific opportunity to go in when GW Micro left the scene. They were GW Micro and Microsoft were doing something in collaboration, whereas if you had Microsoft Office, I think it was 2010 or higher or 2007 or higher, you could get a full running version of Windows and use it as part of your Office subscription. It was a perfect opportunity for Microsoft, and then there may have been other things that came up that put the nix on it, but it was a great opportunity for Microsoft to take that and somehow, buy it out or whatever, and put that in as part of their operating system. I understand that, there's companies that need to make money. But there's also a point is, are you making money at the expense of a situation? In this case, blindness. I don't know. That's a whole other subject for another time. But
well, actually, this is a good time to segue into this issue. Now, JAWS costs over $1,000. Do you know of any software programs for sighted people who cost over $1,000?
Yeah, some of the Adobe packages you can run into the 2,000 and 3,000. Oh yeah, big time, Bob. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, just so we can catch up, I heard this morning that Freedom Scientific, I don't know when it's going to happen, but they are going to, for the home version users, that they're going to have some sort of a subscription program where you can maintain the license at a yearly subscription rate. Now, don't ask me what the price is or anything else like that, but apparently they are starting to make inroads to try to make this, accessible for everybody. And the home version is quite good. I mean, it's there's a few little features that aren't available as opposed to the professional version, but for those who use it a lot at home, it's excellent. And there may be a thing coming in down the road here where every year you do the subscription and you get the update when it comes in and everything else like that. So, as they say in Radio Land, stay tuned.
Okay, just want to make sure about the line. Are there any other callers on the line right now that want to talk to myself, Al, Bill, and Steve? Anybody else out there? Oh, okay, fine.
So, Bob, this might be a good time just to briefly summate some of the solutions and directions that we can go in. And if I might take a stab at some of them, because there are a lot of components here. And I think a lot of people listening to us might be, oh, shoot, I'm confused. I don't know which way to turn. So let me just pull this together, make a stab at it. Anyway, so the issue here is for people who get caught off guard because of updates that might cause loss of function in what they're doing. And that especially is impactful for folks who are vision impaired, let's say in this case, who have screen readers to depend on helping them to navigate around their computer screens. So let's start with the root of it. And when I brought my issue in, what drove this show was the fact that we couldn't get our podcast off the ground from this past weekend. One of the things I think that I heard Bill say, and then I was kind of thinking of based on his ideas, was that when you're updating, and Bob too, your techie said this to you, the first thing that we should probably all go to is Windows to make sure that only appropriate stuff is getting through. So you always want to prioritize your security updates wherever possible. Updates to apps if you're in Windows 8 or 10, or updates to programs if you're involved in versions before that, or on the iOS, I'm not sure. Maybe Steve could help out. But maybe filter out, have it not update your apps, have it not update your programs automatically, so that you can periodically go in every couple of months, select the ones you want to be updated, and then leave the rest of them that you don't even bother with alone. That might be the first major line of defense to people getting surprised like I was on Saturday. Now, the other thing I think that is even more important over a long term moving forward, Bill, this is where you're gold. And that is, we need to stay collaborative with big giant companies who are updating on a regular basis our platforms, trying to keep us all safe, trying to keep the internet community safe. So we can't throw vinegar at them. That only goes so far. Bill, I completely 100% agree. So if you are having an issue and you're not sure of what it is, go online, search out, through Google. Google's pretty good, or any other search engine. They're all pretty good. And just, ask it to help you to find a solution. For instance, if I have a problem, and I did this, issue between Skype and MP3 recorder. And what I immediately found was no solution to the latest Windows update. So the problem was identified, it was recognized. If you just want to find a user group appropriate to your needs and you want to have them help you, Google it. As Bill said, as Steve said, there are a bunch of them out there, and if you hit the wrong one, if they're competent, they should be able to steer you in the right direction in order to get the kind of help that you need.
I'd like to add something at this point.
I have a silver lining, though. Sorry, Bob.
Okay, Steve, that's okay. I just wanted to say something just for a few seconds. with all the upgrades that we're facing and updates, wouldn't it be just as easy for us to update our virus protection software like Norton, for example? Just keep updating the virus protection. That should prevent hackers from doing their thing.
It won't prevent it, Bob. It'll
Not
only
everything,
prevent you
no,
from
not
getting,
everything.
it'll only, because virus programs only recognize viruses that are out there. They don't recognize potential vulnerabilities that aren't viruses.
I see. All right, Steve,
Right.
go right ahead.
Well, on that, I use Windows Defender, but that's a whole other show. But I'm just going to say that the Skype issue affected a lot of people, not just blind people. I know a lot of sick people that were using Skype, and their whole operations were messed up. It's just a totally. I think it affected a lot more than just the blindness community. But that point being aside, it's sometimes the companies are, I understand they want to make money and they want the latest and the greatest, and sometimes they mess up and they don't think about the consequences. But like you said, a little honey here and there is going to help. And, like I said, iOS, they've had their issues too, so it's not like that's better because they've had their upgrades, and it's like, I'm not going to upgrade to iOS 12. I'm going to wait and see what happens online, what issues happen, and maybe I'll wait a couple months until they fix it, because I could be totally upgrade and be totally messed up. So yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Turn off your automatic updates. Let it ask you to update it, and you say, well, I'm going to wait, because for us, I guess it really affects everyone, but I think for us it's worse because we have, when you don't have your screen reader and you don't have your Firefox and you can't get online, that's a major issue. So like with the Firefox, thankfully I had the old version. I could reinstall it. If I didn't, I would have been lost for a long time.
And for me, before I was waiting for my tech support guy to reinstall the old version of Firefox, I had Internet Explorer. Now, I tolerate Internet Explorer, and I use the word tolerate loosely.
Yeah.
It's okay, but it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, is that right?
If I could circle back to Bill, hold that thought, because I wanted to get back to NVIDIA versus JAWS, okay, because there's a lot of people out there who are either avid users of one or the other, and especially if they're thinking about JAWS, maybe one of the big stumbling blocks is the amount of cash they're going to have to lay down on the barrel if they've got to come up with the money. So, Bill, keep me honest here, okay? So from what I'm reading from you, JAWS versus NVIDIA, both great programs. They both are sound, functional programs. I'm going to assume that some of their functionality is different. Let me lay an analogy out to you, Bill, and see if this is accurate. NVIDIA to JAWS is like Linux is to Windows, is like open source Office Suite to Microsoft Office. Is that a fair analogy?
I think it's a very good analogy, really, because the thing is there's a huge user group for NVDA, and I find that a lot of times when things are brought up that there's a problem with this, that, or the other thing, it gets addressed pretty much immediately, pretty much on a whiz bang boom basis. Whereas with
but you have to be a little bit technical savvy in order to navigate. No? Am I wrong about that?
No, I wouldn't say technically savvy. It's how do I put it? It's if you have a problem with a program, you go onto the user group, you say, hey, this is the problem I'm having. Anybody else got any suggestions, any fixes or anything else like that? And a lot of times, even the head honchos, if you will come back and say, yes, we're aware of this. We are working on it. So it may be that they're collaborating with the software vendor, i.e., Microsoft or Adobe or somebody like that.
So they're way more communicative. In other words, you've got a bit of a voice with NVIDIA versus directly with Microsoft, versus JAWS. Is that fair, Bill?
Well, yeah, it is in the sense that because I've seen a lot of problems that have come up and they are immediately addressed in the next update. Whereas with VFO or Freedom Scientific or JAWS, however you want to call them, they prioritize the issues. So, they may not get as many problems with problem A, any reports about problem A, but they have this many reports with problem B, so that gets shoved up to the top. So, everything is prioritized.
Gentlemen, we are about out of time for this edition of Perspective, unfortunately. We could do several shows on this.
Absolutely.
And of course, as we have found out, everybody has their own individual problem and the whole complex gray areas. But I think we've discussed a lot of problems and solutions to what's going on out there in the blind community. And in some cases, as Steve pointed out, the sighted community when it comes to Skype. Thank you very much, Bill, for being a guest on it.
Last minute, Bill. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here.
And Steve, thanks for your input.
Obviously, you've contributed tremendous as well. Thank you. And we hope everybody has a great week. If there are people trying to avoid the last vestiges of the hurricane on the East Coast, go safely. Everybody else go safe. God bless. And we will see you all next week. Thank you. Take care.